Well, it's my fault, right? When we found out that Kat would come, if we could find a show she would be interested in doing, the faculty met and developed a list of potential shows. And I thought, knowing her work before and seeing what she had done, that something by Brecht would be the ideal kind of vehicle, something that would give her permission to work in that sort of post-industrial found object aesthetic that she uses. And I was thinking, well, you know, Brecht, and then I thought of Marat Sade, that we hadn't done it here since 1971. And it was a show that was popping up around the country more and more as the Bush administration got older and older. A lot of the war issues and anti-war issues were coming back. So I put it on the list, not really thinking she would go for it. And that was the one. She said, oh yeah, that one. And the faculty sort of decided it was my fault, I ought to direct it. And then I asked Gwendolyn to help with it. Originally, Cynthia had said she was interested in working on it as well, so that sense of the faculty collaboratively thinking that was a good choice and an interesting show for our season really contributed to it, but it was Kat's choice from a list of, I don't know, 5 or 6 plays.
It's a very challenging, complex play. There's a lot going on in the script. The two things that I was really drawn to was this idea of revolution that is inedible. It seems it's still going on today. The haves versus the have-nots, and that struggle. That was kind of interesting for me because as an artist, I want to be sort of a social commentator, and so I thought that had a nice timeliness with what's going on in today's world. And also the other major part of the play too is this idea of, this insane asylum. Who are these patients that are in this insane asylum? Sometimes people say that everyone has a little bit of craziness in them, or everyone has their crazy moments. And so for me, I wanted to kind of challenge what it is, for this play. Like, is everyone really crazy? Who are the crazy ones? Are the patients really that crazy? So in terms of costumes, that has been a really huge, major part of what my design has been.
I was interested in directing this show for a couple reasons. And one is the complexity of the script. That's something that's delightful about this script, is there are so many layers of reality. Famously, it's a play within a play being performed in an institution, and then people come to see that play. But I think the layers of multiple realities in the play are they reflect the multiple realities that we face in the world. There's a political reality and a human reality, and so for these reasons it was really intriguing to me.
A year and a half ago, I noticed that she was very meticulous about her creation of her pieces, and I wondered if she envisioned these as an entire piece, or how she worked in terms of creating things that actually worked on bodies that were this made of individual pieces and so meticulously put together. And so that's what I was looking forward to learning.
Watching an artist as Kat Chow come in and just watch her process was very exciting. That last week when she was here and we were tweaking costumes and she was bringing in components, and it was so exciting to see an artist in the costume studio working amongst the students and just doing her art was a wonderful experience.
Well, there's a lot to, I think, learn. I recently wrote my statement for the Playbill, and I said how it was a very wonderful learning experience. well, I guess, we were working with a big team of workers, and, we're all trying to get to a common goal together. And so there's a lot of things like, respect, there's trust, and there's this communication, this exchange of energy, where we feed off of each other. And, the more you give, the more you shall receive. So it's kind of having this kind of equal exchange where we all benefit from it, and we're all kind of working for a common goal. So I guess it's nice to just, have gratitude for what everyone is doing. And I feel very lucky to, have had this opportunity to work with, such an amazing, talented group of people.
Well, one of the things I know they learned was different kinds of techniques. Kat came in with a lot of background that we certainly don't do for every show. They learned how to make chainmail. They learned about precision in creation of a series of garments. We had 23 of the same thing, and they were very careful to make them each to her specifications, and finding that exact location for the button or the hook or the decorative element was very, they were very concise and very precise. And that was nice to see how they could do that and feel comfortable in it.
Well, the kinds of techniques we used to approach the show, once we knew we had Kat and the way we were going to go, Gwendolyn and I sat down and said, okay, how do we want to direct this show? And we decided that Kat's approach allowed us to use a large number of innovative training techniques and directing techniques that we had used elsewhere or seen used, but we hadn't really done here. So the idea that because Kat likes to improvise, we would improvise. Because Kat likes to use found objects, we would use found objects. We took a kind of a democratic approach to the production process rather than a traditional director down kind of approach. So what the students brought to rehearsals, what the designers brought to the table, what the student workers, the props guy and the sound designer brought were just as valuable as what we wanted to do with the script. And whatever they brought, we used, or tried to use as best we could. So for example, Kat saying, well, I really want to use, this metal skirt. Yeah, we can use that. We can deal with that.
Well, for me, it's not unlike my art making process, and I really saw this play, even though I'm designing costumes, from the standpoint of an artist who is doing costumes. And so it's very similar to how I work. It's always been, for me, my materials are important and my concept are important as well. And so as I was looking at the script and looking at clothes, there were clothes that I pulled from storage, from thrift stores, that had energy to me, that kind of spoke of these patients. I think about the artist Yayoi Kusama, this Japanese artist who put herself in an insane asylum in Tokyo. I believe she still lives there today, and she was very obsessed with painting these circles and in these infinity rooms with mirrors and endless amounts of energy. And so their patterns kind of similar to that. And like I said, I kind of wanted the patients to have that synergy. And along with that too, I have incorporated some pieces that are inspired by some of my own artworks. And so these patients, at some point, they put on these comfort coats, and it's inspired by this down coat that I did that was in this current exhibition here too. And that's always had a really important message for me, this down coat, where it's this hooded, quilted Kleenex tissue pale blue jacket that has a hood and pockets, and it's meant to comfort you at times when you might be feeling a little down. And so we're translating that into this quilted fabric coat in a pale blue that's shorter, isn't made from Kleenex tissues because that would not hold up here. But it's like the patients need some comfort, and it's also, we're debating too if they're little straps or restraints. I always love to have that kind of ambiguous tension. Are they comforting the patients, or are these kind of more disciplinary coats? And you're not sure. Maybe it's both.
The idea that a new way of approaching each individual can inform what your choices are. If you looked at our large cast and tried to group them, there was very little that made each individual group of the large entity hang together, and yet they really did. At first I thought it was a color choice or a line or a silhouette, but that really wasn't it. There was something innate about their individualness and how the group of performers who were the orchestra had their own look. Though in the mob they didn't look different, but when they all stood together, yes, they had a very look. And the group of singers had their own kind of uniform, if you would, but none that was too outrageous that you couldn't get them as part of the whole. And so seeing how that sort of interwoven kind of concept was displayed was really, really quite beautiful, actually. It was very colorful, it was very playful, and each of those characters that came out had their own individuality as well as being part of their own little cadre of performance.
I was pleased at the costumes in motion. That's always a challenge. If you have costume drawings, they're still on paper. You have actors coming into the fitting room, and by definition they have to stand kind of still so you can do your work. But then they burst into motion on stage, and this one, for Murat Saad, the movement was so expressive, and the costumes functioned well.
I'm a very strong supporter of the collaborative process, and whatever production we work on, it is a collaboration from the directors and the various designers, but it also is a collaboration between Amy and Carol and myself. Carol may be the designer, Amy may be the technical director, I may be the construction supervisor, but on a day-to-day basis, we understand our positions, but we collaborate, we work as a group. And if a student has a question about how this has to be done, any one of us can answer that question. And I think collaborating absolutely promotes communication. And whatever you do, you've got to have the skill of communicating. And I think that's the one strong point that I really support at Theater UNI. And another one is because of our department, we do a lot of one-on-one with the students, and it just can't get any better than that.
When we started the show, I realized that there were all these characters who had what are essentially ensemble roles, who didn't have a lot of text, but who were on stage the whole time. And something that frequently happens in shows in a case like that is those characters are the most difficult to bring to life, and sometimes the actors portraying those roles look like they're not paying attention the whole time and don't look quite as believable as some of the major roles, and I had a fear that that might happen with our production, but it didn't at all. And I was so delighted and so proud of our ensemble that you could look at any actor on that stage at any moment and become completely involved in their world. And that I was so proud of them for that, so proud of my acting students and the cast members.
Well, for me, it was the physical work of the actors, that their ability to walk on stage in a neutral state, take their blue coat off, their comfort coat off, and just drop into their patient. And then from then to the end of the play, or the end of the act, be absolutely consistent living in that patient, and then break it off, come back, start it again, and take it all the way through the play was very, very impressive. It's the thing I think most commented on after the show from the audiences was this sense of I could watch anybody on stage and they were in the world of the play all the time, and consistent.
So I think it's interesting, like I said, I kind of think of this project in a way as an extension of my own creative practice, my own art making practice. And I think it's interesting, as I work, that, whether or not it's conscious or not, you're making these self-portraits in a way, it's just an extension of you. And so, and then that kind of goes back to, when I'm not here, because it's kind of harder when I'm not here traveling, from New York and trying to work on something abstractly as opposed to, being in the moment, working concretely. I'm a sculptor. So for me, it's like I really kind of want to work and mold in there. And so that's been really busy with this part this week, doing that. But kind of going back to the strongest elements and what they are, I don't know, I feel like I'm very playful in my work, and my materials excite me. And so I like the Herald, I think, is one of my favorite characters in the play. He's very playful, and he runs the show, and but then he also has this kind of almost, he has this kind of more punk and raw side to him, and then he also has these kind of more fluid, more elegant, maybe sophisticated moments. And I think that's kind of interesting too, because I always like to create this tension, and so there's something, very kind of raw and like I say, punk about it, but there's also something very sophisticated too. And I think if you look at the costumes, you can see the dichotomies of those two worlds meshing together, and that tension, which I always feel like if you have those opposing forces, that kind of creates a very good, I don't know, a pull for the viewer in the work.
People shouldn't get the idea that this is something we do all the time. That Maratsa was a very unique kind of production for us that came in with a great deal of external support. We could never have brought Kat in on our own nickel. That we had, the faculty had gone out and applied for grants, had established the connection with Kat with other departments on campus. So we were collaborating off campus with funding sources. We're collaborating on campus with other departments, the art department and the textiles and fashion folks in another college, to make this event happen, and to have 32 people in the cast and 50 odd people on the cruise, and the extended rehearsal period, because we did rehearse longer than usual, and the kinds of resources that were brought to bear to make this successful, speaks both to a unique project, but also the department's ability to decide it wants to do something really big and pull it